Hi, this is Piiyuuk, and I'm here with Willie. And just tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
Well, that was a long time ago, but it was a unique upbringing because of the way things have changed over time. I turned 75 last summer, and back in those days, we were living in a different world. I mean, it was our world. There were a lot of things that were going to change that we didn't know about at the time, but I was raised with my family, mostly outside of Kotzebue, in a little place called Iggiagruk. Iggiagruk means it's shallow. The water was very shallow there, but there was a creek that had a lot of whitefish in it, and we were not that far from another larger river, the Lilnoatak, where there was a lot of pike and a lot of tiktaalik, that is bottom fish in the river. There was a lot of sheepfish, there was a lot of rabbits and a lot of ptarmigans, and there was also a lot of timber, which was important. There was a lot of not only driftwood, but there was lots of alders, and there was also spruce trees up the river. So we went back and forth by dog team. Everybody had dog teams back then because you had to have them. And it was before TV. It was before telephones. It was before electricity.
And Facebook?
No Facebook, no Fitbit. And so it was a different world. We liked comics. We were just learning to read English back then. And so I was pretty much raised as a country boy, so to speak, but started going to school in Kotzebue and also spent a winter at Norvik upriver. And back then, there were no such things as high schools in the rural areas, and we didn't even know what a gymnasium was. We played our own games. There was no such thing as school lunches. We had a couple of little crackers and about that much orange or tomato juice and cod liver oil, or there wasn't much. But yet we went to school. We learned to read. We learned to write a little bit. We need to learn to add and subtract. And in those days, that was almost enough because we were living out in the country then. But I ended up going to a boarding school, like many of us did. But I went to a boarding school 5,000 miles away in Tennessee, and spent 4 years there. But the thing that I think is important, at least in my life, was that I grew up with people that had strong values. They were real traditional types, From the turn of the century, I was adopted, my sister, to my mother's uncle. And from them, we kind of picked up what we know of the culture, of the language, of the ways of the people, of the way you treated other people. And also, I think, I think the strong thing nowadays is that you have to have a sense of your own identity. And with that identity comes the values, And to me, part of that is that, you care about people. You care about what happens to your own people. And I think that was part of the great motivation for me, was that I began to see that there were a lot of inequities, and that our own people needed to have some say in their lives, because back then we didn't have any say, really. We were being manipulated by government, by others. And of course, at that time, back in the 60s, the biggest threat was the control of our own space, that is the land. And that's how I got involved, was by doing research. And I'm a firm believer in research, because you got to have the facts. I mean, if you're going to stand up and say something that's controversial, you better darn well know what you're talking about, And so I think that was a saving grace for me, is that I had done the research. I went back and looked at the history. I went back and I looked at the law. I went back and looked at the regulations. I had some sense of how our own people use the land. And so I was sort of in the right place at the right time, with the right information. Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about how the world that we see today is different from when you were younger, and you grew up in this time of change.
Yes.
So why is this conference important?
It's important because we're going to depend on you and many of the other young people to lead our people. and to make a difference in public policy. And so to me, this is a great training ground for young people to not only become familiar with the language and the cultural ways, but also to hear from the elders of their own experiences. We had a lot of fun just a moment ago in our language circle. I think that's very important because, we oftentimes think of language as real drudgery. Because, like I studied Russian for 2 years. It was a lot of work, but it can be a lot of fun. And there's a lot of technology now that will really help. So these conferences that we've put on, I've been to, by the way, every convention for 50 years. Yeah, every AFN convention for 50 years. And it's always great to see familiar faces, people I went to school with. And so it's a place to share ideas, it's a place to share experiences, and it's a place to share knowledge. And I think it's just great that we do it. Mm-hmm.
Well, Kuya Iggiagruk, for sharing. You touched on a lot of very important issues. And Kuya for being here with me.
Well, thank you for your leadership too. Mm-hmm.